let's get right to it. Once again, for this stream, for this Monday night 8 p.m. stream, we're going to be looking at Epsilon Redeemer Draft 4, which is the sequel to 2011's Epsilon Broken Stars. So, with no further ado, we're going to go ahead and get to it. If you hear some meowing in the background, that is my fuzzy roommate and mascot, Katie the House Panther, who is saying hello. So last time we finished chapter 1, and now we are moving on to chapter 2. These animal emojis are killing me. You know, I'm told I sound very different in audio than I do in real life. Not sure what it is. It just is. pro tip, Ren does still have her comm, and it is still functioning, but no one asks. So, there's that. I took a deep breath and forced myself to be calm to look at our options. We could go over the walls back here, at the far end of the gardens, opposite the gates where the Imperium troopers were arrayed, watching and waiting. Hopefully, we'd be able to make it to the sanctuary without being seen by those men watching the gate. The wall was nearly 10 feet high, though, and I didn't think it was thick enough to easily balance on despite its height. How would we get Will up and over? There was the option of trying to take out the men watching the gate, but the gate itself was locked, and I sincerely doubted any of us had a key. My comm was smashed, and I was willing to lay odds that Will's was as useless as mine was right now. Alexei didn't carry one. That left Ren's, if she had hers, and it was still functioning. We're wasting time, Will rasped. Let's get up and over before someone sees us. He looked at Ren. You first. Erin. That's the second time she's called him that. I swallowed hard, realizing that the key to the lock that I'd been searching for since the day he'd found her half frozen on the streets of Perry had been in front of me the entire time. Fuck me. That's what it is. That's what it is. What it's always been. How did I not? Don't argue with me, Ren. He took her hand and squeezed it so tightly his knuckles went white. I can't pull myself up like this. Someone's going to have to help me. Her breath caught and she nodded mutely. I looked up and down the street again, then headed for a section of the wall that looked the most likely to pull. That looked like it was the most likely place to scale it. Be great if I could talk tonight. That'd be fantastic. True story, when I was trying to figure out that particular width, I actually took out a ruler and I was holding my hand out and I was like, okay, how wide are my fingers apart? All right, good. That'll work. There's actually a wall by the elementary school that I went to, and it's a little bit wider than that, but not by much. And I remember us being able to very easily um, sit on it. So I decided, well, it's got to be a little bit narrower than that. So it will be a little bit more difficult for them to do this, but at the same time, not impossible for them to do this. All of my little formatting quirks that you get to see while I'm working on this. I stood and studied it for a second, trying to at least appear that I was confident in my choice, then nodded as if to erase all doubts. All right, come on, Run. Up you go. I made a saddle of my hands so she could step up. She cast one look at Will before she let go of his hand and came over to me. Bracing one hand against my shoulder, she stepped into my laced hands and then up, her other foot landing on my shoulder before she grasped the edge of the wall and hauled herself up. Alexei kept watch, his expression shadowed and grim in the darkness. A light, ice-cold drizzle had started. The only saving grace for any of us was that there wasn't any wind. Not yet, anyhow. Wren wavered on the edge of the wall, cursing softly. It's really narrow up here, she hissed down to me. I grimaced. I'd been afraid of that. How wide? She held up her hand, finger splayed. 8 inches, I think, but barely. Wide as my hand span. I cast a wary glance at Will, who shook his head slightly. We don't have any other options, he rasped. Unless you want me to stay out here. I will if that's the only option. No, Wren snapped, probably louder than she intended, then clapped a hand over her mouth. She looked around slowly, brows knitting, then exhaled a silent sigh of relief. No one had heard. She looked down at me. Boost him up, Walouk. Will swallowed hard and grit his teeth as Alexei and I started to boost him up toward Wren's reaching hand. It took 2 swings before Will caught her arm, and he gasped in pain, choking on a cry as she hauled him up to the top of the wall to join her, half by his arm and half by his shredded jacket and shirt beneath. He held onto the edge with both hands as he sat there, swaying and pale. Wren touched his arm gently, then looked down at me. Your tune, Luke. She reached down to grasp my hand. I shook my head. I'm coming. Get him on the ground. I nodded to Alexei, who looked up and down the street one last time before he turned again to boost me up toward the edge of the wall. Yeah. Will's a mess. It's kind of funny, but he's really a mess. Because, if you're dropping into a garden at night and you don't know exactly what's beneath you, you might as well fall in a bush. Of course, Will is going to pay for his laughter pretty quickly here. Will has had similar problems in the past. We'll just leave it at that. What are you doing? Ren hissed suddenly just as I was getting my hands hooked over the edge. I looked up, opening my mouth to answer before I realized she wasn't talking to me. Will was inching painfully along the top of the wall, leaving a trail of blood in his wake. The tourniquet was gone, and he'd soaked through the pressure bandages wrapped around his leg. He looked at her strangely. There's a mikveh over here. Probably do less damage to myself if I fall in water. Ren and I looked at each other, even as I dangled from the edge of the wall. I gave a quick head shake and started to haul myself up. Will inched another few feet down the wall as I clambered up to the top. He glanced over the edge as I got my balance on the narrow wall, then gave a watery smile. See you at the bottom, he whispered, then rolled off the wall. I lunged for him, wincing. There was a splash a second later, and Ren and I both breathed a quiet sigh of relief. She nodded toward the gardens below. You first, she whispered. Be careful. I nodded and carefully maneuvered myself over the inside edge of the wall, hanging by my fingertips before I dropped over the edge, crunching into a bush I couldn't see in the darkness. I could hear Will chuckling painfully as I cursed under my breath, extracting myself from my landing zone. Wren landed next to me a few seconds later, just barely shy of the bush that cushioned my fall. She landed in a crouch, far more seasoned when it came to this flavor of cloak and dagger bullshit than I was. I muttered another curse and moved over toward Will, who was still dragging himself up the steps and out of the narrow but deep pool of water. I grabbed him by his uninjured arm and hauled him upright. He bit back a curse, no longer laughing. He coughed hard, once, twice, then looked at his hand. Blood spattered his palm. Oh, he moaned quietly. That's not good. Shit, I mumbled. No, that's not good. Wren, help me. She was there in a heartbeat, on the other side of Will. We started carrying him toward the cathedral, toward one of the entrances I knew along the side of the building. One I hoped would be hidden enough in the building's shadow that the Imperium troops watching the gate would miss our passage entirely. With regards to Father Alex, he probably did see this coming at some point. Just not entirely certain what the context would have been. getting pretty close to where I think I'm probably gonna cut this chapter. A few more paragraphs though, and some more dialogue coming. I love Will, but I beat him up a lot. It's great. Ren closed the door behind us, sealing us in darkness. My foot found the edge of a step, and I stopped before we could all go over. Stairs, I said. 12 of them, Will said. After that, straight line for 20 paces, turn left, 15 paces, and you'll hit the set headed back up again. Right. We didn't say anything else until we hit the bottom of the second set of stairs. I guess all of us were counting our footsteps. Ren bumped into something that fell over, and she cursed at the sound. But other than that, there were no mishaps despite the pitch darkness and Will's weakening state. Another 12 sets up, Will whispered, then coughed and moaned again, his head lolling toward Ren's shoulder. He sucked in a breath and continued. Landing at the top is maybe 3 paces across. Door opens out. Okay, I said. Now shut up and save your strength. I have a bad feeling you're going to need it. He snorted in mock amusement, then went silent as we started to climb the stairs. Ren reached for the door at the top while I held Will up. He was dead weight against me, and I could feel warm, wet stickiness through his jacket and shirt. Still bleeding and bad. Damnation. How much had I missed in that alleyway? How much had been made worse in the last 15 minutes? Ren reached back and squeezed my arm. My hand twisted to grasp hers, and I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I prayed to a god I wasn't sure I believed in, that the Imperium wasn't inside the cathedral, too. Ren opened the door, and the 3 of us found ourselves staring down the barrel of a rifle. And that, I think, is where we are going to wrap up Chapter 2 there. It's a little bit of a shorter chapter, but it makes sense for levels of tension and what comes next. So I want to thank everyone who has joined us for this evening. I will be doing another stream soon, maybe possibly as early as tomorrow. We'll see how I feel when it comes time to write the Awakenings update tomorrow. But again, thank you for joining me tonight while I was working on the 4th draft of Epsilon Redeemer, the sequel to 2011's Epsilon Broken Stars. Make sure that you follow me on YouTube, on Twitch, and think about funding me through Patreon. Every little bit helps. Have a great night, guys. Thanks again.